Welcome to our first virtual programmers panel for the 29th Philadelphia Film Festival. We are really excited about our program this year. While it's certainly been a very different year, and we're going to have a new experience putting on a festival without any traditional theaters, we're excited that our new digital streaming platform will allow us to be more accessible and inclusive than ever. We'll have people joining us from throughout the greater Philadelphia area, and in fact, throughout the country in many cases. And of course, we've still got some in-person screenings, albeit in a very safe and socially distanced manner at our PFS drive-in at the Navy Yard. I hope many of you can join us there. Before jumping into talking about the program, I do want to send out a special thanks to all of our members, all of our supporters, and all of our sponsors who have been with us through the pandemic, especially official sponsors of the film festival, 6ABC, AKA, Philadelphia Style, and Wavelength Productions, as well as to both the Albert M. Greenfield Foundation for helping to underwrite the new digital streaming platform, and to the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation for helping to underwrite the PFS drive-in at the Navy Yard. With that, I'd like to introduce Alex Gibson, who's going to take you through some of the how-to for this very new, interesting PFS 29.
Hi, I'm Alex Gibson. I am the Programs Director for the Philadelphia Film Society, and I'm going to share some How to Fest Best tips for PFS 29. As Andy said, we are doing our first ever hybrid festival this year. So some of our screenings will be hosted at the drive-in at the Navy Yard. It'll be home to our free ticketing initiative, PFF on Us, as well as a selection of our marquee screenings. A lot of the ticketing for the drive-in will be familiar to some of our patrons, except that we'll be charging by car rather than by person. The only thing that's not changed is the safety protocols. We want to keep everyone very safe, so please review those before you come. The other part of the festival will be on our virtual platform. We realize that this is new to a lot of people. It's new to us too. So we've compiled a lot of how-tos and FAQs on our website. Some basic things that you need to know are that the platform will be accessible through your browser on your computer, phone, or tablet. It'll also be accessible on our apps on Apple TV and Roku. Now, if you don't have an Apple TV or a Roku, don't worry. We have tons of tips on the website on how to connect your computer to your TV so you can still see your films on a bigger screen. Now let's talk about how you can get access to the festival. We have badges and tickets on sale now. With a badge, you'll be able to log into the virtual platform, browse the lineup, and watch films at your leisure. We have 3 badge levels available. The Streaming Pass allows you to view anything that's streaming and available. The Spotlight All Access badge allows you access to the streaming platform, but also allows you access to our marquee screenings at the drive-in. This badge is exclusive to PFS members, so please take a look into membership if you're interested in that badge. The Premier All Access badge allows you access to the streaming platform, marquee events at the drive-in, and priority parking at the drive-in, as well as a free Roku stick sent to your home. We also have tickets available for each individual film. With your ticket purchase, you'll receive a voucher code that will give you access to your film. Now, when you're planning your lineup or purchasing your tickets, there are a couple things that you'll want to pay attention to. The first one is the availability. Each film will be premiering throughout the festival. Many of them will be available from their premiere time until the end of the festival or until their views run out. But some of them have limited windows. This will be noted on the film listing, so make sure you pay attention to that. The other thing you'll want to pay attention to is geo-blocking. Geo-blocking limits the location of the film viewers. Most of our films can be watched anywhere in the United States, but some of them are geo-blocked so that only viewers in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware can watch them. All of this information is going to be on the film listing, so please note that before you purchase. Just like in traditional screenings, virtual screenings have a limited number of views. So we advise that our badge holders prioritize their lineup and make sure to watch things as close to the premiere time as possible. Just a couple more things to make sure you have the best fest that you can. We'll be having a myriad of Q&As, both pre-recorded and live. We'll be posting those on our website, so please check back. We will also be having a virtual festival lounge where you can win prizes, connect with PFS, and talk about films just like you would at a traditional festival. As always, please keep an eye on our website for updates, and don't forget to peruse our FAQ page for how-tos and tips. With that, I'd like to pass it on to PFS Artistic Director, Mike Lerman.
Thanks, Alex. I'm so excited that you guys are watching this, and I'm so excited that you're sticking with us through this tough time with the festival. We're really excited because we put so much work into still keeping this festival up to the same quality that it's always been. And I think the team has done an incredible job. I think you're going to find that this program is really special, and I think it's particularly special that we can bring it into your homes and into our drive-in as well. We've made a few changes this year in terms of the structure of how we're presenting the program. Primarily, we've removed the sidebars or the categories that we've used traditionally because I think it's a different year. I think the program's a little bit different and a little bit smaller. And I think we want the films to kind of just pop on their own merit and pop in the way that you can discover them day to day on your own personal viewing systems or by going over to the drive-in and seeing what we're showing there. It's a lot of the films will be available not just at the time that they're scheduled for, but throughout the course of the week, as long as they don't end up selling out. So you can kind of choose your schedule at your leisure in that way, and it seemed appropriate to match the way the program is structured in that way as well. But you know, I think there are a lot of interesting themes that have popped out. Obviously, it's a very important political year. I think we have some really strong kind of unheralded new voices in storytelling. We have some a great large crop of new female directors, particularly, and diverse stories. And yeah, I just want to kind of jump into it. So I'm going to throw it back to Andy, and he's going to talk a little bit about the marquee screenings, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Mike. So the first films I want to draw everyone's attention to are what we're calling our marquee screenings this year. This is some of the most highly anticipated films of the year, the films you're going to be talking about for the next several months that are going to be in the award conversation. We have 6 in total. 3 of them are going to be at our PFS drive-in, and 3 of them will be exclusive to our digital platform. At the drive-in, we have Nomadland, which is was the winner of the Golden Lion in Venice, as well as the TIFF People's Choice Award, usually a teller of films that go on to at least get nominated for Best Picture, if not win it. It's a stunning film featuring an incredible performance by Frances McDormand, and we're thrilled to have it for you for the Philadelphia premiere. Also at the drive-in is One Night in Miami. This is Regina King's directorial debut that deals with literally one night in Miami after Cassius Clay wins the heavyweight championship of the world. And he's with his friends who include Malcolm X and Sam Cooke and Jim Brown, of course. And it's their evening together through that night. Really interesting, powerful film that we're also excited to present. And then also at the drive-in, we have Ammonite, which is starring Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan, and it's about their relationship. And I think a lot of people will be talking about that one as well. On our digital platform, we have 3 films. We have Herself, which is a film about a young mother trying to build a home for herself after escaping from her abusive husband. Premiered in Sundance to lots of acclaim, as did our second film on the platform, Minari, which actually went on to win both the grand prize and the audience award at Sundance. It follows the ups and downs of a Korean-American family adjusting to their new life in Arkansas in search for the American dream. And then we have The Sound of Metal, which has an incredible performance from Riz Ahmed as a former heavy metal drummer who is losing his hearing and trying to cope with the suddenness and the consequences of that. So 6 really great films that we know you'll be talking about, and we are thrilled to bring to you first. With that, I'm going to pass this along to Trey to tell you about some other festival winners.
Hi, my name is Trey Shields. I am the senior programmer for the Philadelphia Film Festival as well as the Philadelphia Film Society. At this point, this year Sundance feels like 10 years ago, but indeed it was only several months ago. In addition to Minari as the Grand Jury Prize winner, we also have two films that we're showing that I want to highlight. Yalda, A Night of Forgiveness. This film follows a practice where there is a reality show in Iran that puts together two parties or often individuals to seek forgiveness from each other. And so with Yalda, we follow a woman who must seek forgiveness for the daughter of her dead husband that she is being blamed with. And through that, we spent a whole night with secrets and past drama being divulged. The film is great in withholding and giving at the right times and thrilling the entire way through. And there's also the winner of the International Prize for Cinematography for International Film from Sundance is Acasa, My Home, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this panel. And then I also want to talk about another Iranian film out of Berlin, the Golden Bear winner, There Is No Evil, and it deals with capital punishment and how it's dealt with and presented in Iran. But with this film, there's 4 different stories being told. And though death lingers kind of over each story, they're very different in execution, whether it's slice of life, romance, or even a thriller. So definitely check that out. Whenever there's a Christian Petzold film in our lineup, it's a cause for celebration. He is the director behind Phoenix, as well as Transit from past couple years. This year he has Undine, starring Paula Beer, who is also in Transit, and she won Best Actress over at Berlin. I know Andy mentioned the Golden Lion winner, Nomadland Land. I also want to highlight the Silver Lion winner, New Order, which will also be talked about a little bit later in this panel. And then finally, Cannes. It didn't happen this year, but they did a kind of an odd thing. They made an entire list of Cannes selections, not really denoting whether one was going to be in competition or in a certain regard or out of competition. But we do have a number of films featured in our lineup, so be sure to check that out as well. Now I'm going to be turning this over back to Mike.
Yeah, I just want to quickly highlight our competition films. Our narrative feature competition has 8 titles this year. I'll run them down very, very quickly, but first is Apples. It's a Greek film about a guy kind of dealing with amnesia and looking for his memories. The second is a incredibly moving movie from South Korea called The House of Us, about a girl who's trying to hold her family together through crisis. The third is a Tunisian film called A Son, about a kind of unburied family secrets that populate up when the child in the family is hurt and put in critical condition after a confrontation at the border. Spring Blossom is a very sweet kind of first love story from France, made by a new filmmaker who I think we're going to see a lot from. Survival Skills is just kind of a unique take on police enforcement, and it's set up as a police training video and then turns into something much more interesting and subversive and a satire. Two of Us is a moving story about 2 elderly women who are in love and who've been in love in secret and who have their relationship tested when they suddenly can't visit each other anymore because of an inciting incident that I won't reveal to you. You'll have to come check it out. But White Lie is the story of a grad student who pretends to have cancer in order to make sure that she gets scholarships, and raises money for her to put herself through school. And Preparations to Be Together for an Unknown Period of Time is the story of a woman who falls in love with a man and moves to Budapest to be with him, only to discover that he claims he has no idea who she is once she gets there, and kind of the tension of what happens after that. So I would definitely check out those movies. We've highlighted them for a reason, and I think they're all really kind of smart, involved, thoughtful filmmaking, and they're all worth your time. The second thing I wanted to highlight was the documentary competition, Acasa, My Home, which Travis will talk a little bit more about later, but was an award winner from Sundance. Bulletproof is an examination of gun violence in the schools and precautions that are being taken in US schools now for gun violence. Enemies of the State is about an American family that flees the country after the son is targeted as a hacker and all the things that they have to endure, but also it's got mystery involved and intrigue and talks about government corruption, but also talks about a very complicated character. In and of itself is a live tape show of probably the most unique magic show you'll ever see. And it's directed by Frank Oz. And it's strangely moving, but also mystical and beautiful and worth checking out. Mayor is an inside look at a charismatic mayor of Ramallah in Palestine, and talks a lot about politics in the West Bank, obviously. MLK FBI is a story of uncovered investigation of how the FBI was tracking Martin Luther King, and a lot of corruption that is there, and it's got to be seen to be believed. No Ordinary Man is a unique version of storytelling about this trans jazz pianist who had to hide their gender and basically their identity throughout their entire life, and but it's told partially through auditions with trans actors to play this person, and it brings up a lot of very important trans issues, and it's just a fascinating story. And Some Kind of Heaven is a sweet, funny, sad, and larger than life story of a retirement home, a Disneyland for seniors. It's a retirement community. And it's one of these things that feels like no part of it is a documentary, even though you can't believe that all of it is real. So those are our competition sections, and I want to throw it over to Travis now to talk about our local films.
My name is Travis True. I'm programming manager for the Philadelphia Film Society and for the festival. So usually we have a Philadelphia sidebar in the festival, which is just for local films. This year, even though we don't have sidebars, I still wanted to draw your attention to some of the great local work that we have, either shot in Philadelphia or made by filmmakers who have strong ties to Philadelphia. So one is called 40 Years a Prisoner. It just premiered at TIFF. And it's directed by Tommy Oliver, who's a filmmaker whose work we've had in the festival in the past. He directed 1982, which we had in the fest a few years ago. But 40 Years a Prisoner follows Mike Africa Jr., both of whose parents were arrested. They were part of MOVE, the radical Black organization in West Philly in the 1970s and 80s. So he was actually born in prison and for his entire life has been fighting for the exoneration of his parents. So it's a fascinating story. Even if you already think you know a little bit about MOVE, it goes really in depth into that history, but it's also a very personal story about this one man's journey. And of course, it's incredibly relevant today. Another very different documentary is called Beethoven in Beijing. And it is by two filmmakers, Jennifer Lin and Sharon Mullally. And it's really interesting because it is specifically about the Philadelphia Orchestra and their relationship with China, which I didn't realize that they played such an important role in sort of opening up China to Western cultural influences. But in 1973, the Philadelphia Orchestra actually toured China very soon after it was just sort of starting to open up to America and to the West. And they were really instrumental, no pun intended, in creating an appetite for Western classical music in China, which has really exploded in the last few decades. So it's a fascinating film, even if you aren't a classical music fan. It gets into history, culture, a lot of really interesting stuff, and it's obviously also very local. Goodbye Honey is by filmmakers who are Drexel alums. It was shot in rural Pennsylvania. I won't give away too much about the plot because it's a really sort of like taut thriller, but it's basically about this woman who's been abducted, seeking help from this sort of tired truck driver, and things that happen over the course of this night. It's a really entertaining film, again, by local filmmakers, which is really exciting. Michael Smerconish, Things I Wish I Knew Before I Started Talking. Many of you are probably familiar with Michael Smerconish. He's a political commentator, author, and radio talk show host who's from the Philadelphia area. He recorded this performance. The film itself is a performance film at Bucks County Playhouse right after everything sort of went into lockdown after the COVID-19 quarantine happened. It was originally supposed to have been a live performance in front of an audience. Obviously, he had to sort of shuttle those plans. But the performance itself is basically a combination of personal memoir of Smerconish sort of talking about his life and his sort of political awakening. And then it's also his observations on our current political climate and how we sort of got to this very polarized place politically. He's a very independent-minded thinker, so it's really fascinating to hear what he has to say, and obviously really relevant since the festival is happening right before a big election. Marionette Land is by a director named Alexander Monelli, who's local and actually directed a film that we had in the festival a couple of years ago called At the Drive-In, which won our Best Local Feature Award back then. And this is another super local subject. It's about Robert Brock, who's the proprietor of the Marionette Theater in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He's a fascinating character. He's been operating this Marionette Theater, making the puppets, and performing himself, basically by himself, for decades. The film gets into his personal life, his relationship to his elderly mother, and it also even gets into the way that the pandemic has affected the theater's operations, which is pretty fascinating to see, given that's pretty recent history. It's a really moving, funny, warm film. Definitely recommend that. And one more local feature that I want to highlight is a documentary called The Witmans. It's about a Pennsylvania family who was sort of torn apart in the aftermath of this really violent crime that happened in 1998. Gregory Witman, who's a 13-year-old, was brutally murdered. And his older brother, who was 15 at the time, Zach, was accused of the murder and was actually convicted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So the film really highlights the experiences of Ron and Sue Whitman, their parents, and the way that they sort of lost one son who was murdered and another son who they believe was convicted of a crime he did not commit, and their efforts over the last decades to exonerate him as well. So it's fascinating as a true crime documentary. It's also fascinating as a portrait of grief and these two regular people who are going through this incredibly traumatic, unimaginable experience. And it also gets into criminal justice. It actually features interviews with Brian Stevenson, who was the subject of our opening night film last year, Just Mercy, and the ways that the American criminal justice system treats juveniles, which is fascinating and really eye-opening. And then one last thing, for the second year, we're doing a shorts block that's dedicated just to local shorts, so locally made or by local filmmakers. It includes 5 narrative shorts and 1 really amazing documentary short. Last year's best short winner actually came from our local shorts sidebar section. So I highly recommend that you check those out too. And I think that's about it for me. So I'm just going to turn things over to Catherine, who's going to discuss some of the shorts that we have in the festival this year.
Yes, I'm Catherine Preston. I'm one of the programmers, and I'm very excited to talk just very briefly about some of the shorts in our shorts program this year. We have some really great documentary shorts, narrative shorts, animated shorts. So I just want to highlight a couple to just keep an eye out for that I'm particularly excited for. In our documentary shorts program, I was really moved by Huntsville Station. It shows inmates that have been newly released making their way to a Greyhound station in Texas, sort of as a transition before heading home. And it's just this really beautiful, intimate snapshot of this pivotal moment in these people's lives of, that time in between incarceration and freedom. And it's a really beautiful, as I said, very intimate portrait. So I highly recommend that. In our narrative shorts program, there's a short called Dummy that I really like. And I don't want to say too much, but it is very chilling and very stark, but it's a restaging of a grisly crime, except it's broad daylight and they're using a dummy. So it's this really interesting contrast, but very good. And then in our animated shorts program, I'm really excited about one called Mizuko. It's a really interesting hybrid between a documentary and an animated film, sort of mixing all different types of filmmaking and animation styles, all very beautiful. And it sort of delves into this very personal experience of the filmmaker who is sort of processing and grieving a terminated pregnancy. And it's not as dark or heavy as you might think. So I highly recommend that. It's very beautiful. And I'm really excited about the shorts program. And now I will turn it over to Trey.
This year, for films that would normally fall into like after hours-esque category, includes 2 Taiwanese films. One includes Detention, which is a ominous, creepy, spooky ghost story film, as well as Get the Hell Out, which is a zany, style for days, goes for broke film about politicians turned brainless into monsters. And in addition to that, I also want to highlight Goodbye Honey, which Travis talked about. Once again, it's a local produced film that is just one night from hell. We also have Psycho Goreman, which is a Saturday morning cartoon or TV show turned R-rated, as well as a really unique and kind of multi-genre that evolves into something very different, Survival Skills, an 80s police tape that we've just seemed to have discovered that talks about a cop's first day on the job. And then also there's Breaking Surface. Breaking Surface is a film about survival, and it's nail-biting, and that it's a woman trapped underwater and how she must use her willpower and help along the way to survive. And then finally, we have a special presentation of a Canadian gem, long lost, from 1980 called Deadline. This is just one of those movies you might have found late at night on television and you just wouldn't be able to turn away from. Between the moments of excess gore, that is hilarious. It's very animated and over the top. We have a writer who's just grumpy, smug, and he's sick of his family, and he just wants to write something good for once and not just trashy horror. And along the way, there's a lot of surprises, a lot of laughs, and it's just a ridiculous film. And so that's about it for the After Hours-esque. Of course, this year has more thrillers than I think we've ever seen before. So even though I didn't highlight them, there's a bunch of thrilling films in the lineup. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mike. He's going to touch upon some special aspects of the program this year.
Obviously, we have a big election coming up, and it's right on the heels of the festival. It's the day after the festival. And so I want to highlight that we have a lot of films that deal with a lot of the major issues that are happening in America right now, that are happening in our political climate, that we're hoping that our audience will think about and that everyone will think about and get out and vote. And I wanted to kind of run down the list for you. We've talked about a lot of them already, but I just wanted to make sure you highlighted them in case you wanted to kind of get deeper into these issues. The main issues that we feel like are highlighted this year are government corruption, gun violence, immigration, capital punishment, police brutality, protest, and race relations. And the films that cover these are 40 Years a Prisoner, Bulletproof, Coded Bias, Enemies of the State, La Leyenda Negra, MLK FBI, New Order, No Ordinary Man, The Obituary of Tunde Johnson, Survival Skills, There Is No Evil, Mayor, and Tomorrow the Entire World. Anyway, with that, I wanted to we're each going to give a couple personal picks and wrap up. And thank you, guys.
All right, so 2 movies I just want to bring your attention to that I'm really excited about, and I highly recommend that you do not miss, ones that I just really love in this program. The first is a beautiful Japanese movie called True Mothers. It is this incredible saga that sort of jumps through time, so it doesn't really give you everything right up front, but it sort of unfolds into this really interesting look into what it means to be a mother. And it has this couple who's adopted a son. And once that son reaches kindergarten age, the parents are sort of confronted by this woman who is claiming to be the birth mother. And from there, it sort of just turns into this crazy, beautiful journey. But I highly recommend that. And then my other pick is a movie called Emma, which also happens to deal with a couple that goes through the adoption process. And I don't want to give too much away about it, but it's sort of the adoption goes astray and the couple really has to deal with the consequences of that. But it is a thrilling movie. It keeps you guessing. It's incredibly cool, really sexy. And so I highly recommend that one as well.
So my two picks for two films that I really love that you should not miss in the festival lineup. One is called Some Kind of Heaven. It's directed by Lance Oppenheim, and it's a look at this kind of bizarre place in Florida called The Villages. It's actually the world's largest retirement community, senior living community. And the director follows 4 people living on the premises of this retirement center, and just sort of looks at the different ways in which they're sort of experiencing getting older and some of the disappointments and joys that come with that. It's a really beautiful film. He really takes full advantage of the sort of bizarreness of the setting, but it's at the same time really empathetic to its 4 subjects, so I highly recommend it. And then another really moving, beautiful documentary is called Acasa, My Home, and it follows this family, 2 parents and their 9 children who have been living for decades in this sort of undeveloped marsh right on the outskirts of Bucharest in Romania. And it follows them over several years as the city sort of forcibly evicts them from the site where they've been living in poverty for decades and forces them to move into an apartment and to sort of embrace modern life. I won't give away too much about it, but it's just an incredibly thought-provoking, beautiful film, which I highly recommend that you check out.
I have 2 very different films that I would like to highlight this year for the Film Fest. Both left me completely transfixed, enamored, and just unable to, I don't know, take in every single detail that is happening on screen. My first pick is Night of the Kings, this very thrilling film that, for such a visual medium, uses the power of words to really tell its story. What it does is it follows this newcomer to a prison in the Ivory Coast, and he is pretty much unwillingly given the title of Roman, or storyteller. And he is supposed to entertain this pretty rambunctious, wild crowd of inmates with a story for the entire evening, or something will happen. And it really is just the world building in this film, the ambiance, the visuals is just relentless and just intrigue. But and then from there, I really want to mention Lawrence Michael Levine's Black Bear. His previous film, Wild Canaries, was very much a hipster hit over at the Film Fest a couple years ago. And this one left me transfixed for different reasons. It is a puzzling, dramatic, but also hilarious. It depends really on your perspective with it. Puzzling story about 3 very different type of people conjoining at a countryside home, and things happen. But I can't get over the how every little detail from costumes to lines of dialogue play an important part in unraveling this puzzle. And I think you guys will really enjoy it, and it's made for viewing at home and at the drive-in.
I just want to highlight 2 other movies that I think are really great, very different films. One is a film by Michel Franco. It's a Mexican film called New Order. It's very intense. It's probably our most intense movie, and I want to warn you that if you don't feel prepared for it, I would not wade into there. But it is this kind of unflinching look at the nightmare of what an authoritarian regime gone wrong can be like societally. It's some people at a middle class wedding on a day when there were riots in a city in Mexico, and the army rebels. And it gets very, very nasty and very dark, but I think it speaks very much to some fears that we're experiencing in the country and in the world, and looking at current protests and just kind of the current situation. So I think if you have the predilection for it, and if you have the stomach for it, it is very important cinema. And on the flip side, in a very light manner, I wanted to recommend a film called PG, Psycho Goreman, which is one of the films we're going to show on Halloween and also one other time at the drive-in. And it is kind of a genre comedy, a little bit gory, about a creature that comes down from space, and he's a kind of evil, nasty barbarian, but he has a stone that controls him, and anybody that has this can control him, and he'll have to do whatever they want. And these children that get a hold of it and are able to control this kind of nasty barbarian and hilarity and insanity ensues in their town. And I think it's a very unique voice. I think it's really entertaining, and I think it's definitely worth checking out. So those would be my 2 picks, on top of everything else we talked about.
To close it out, I'll give you my 2 picks. Like Mike, they're very different from one another. The first is Little Fish, which is heartbreaking. It's about some type of virus that is inflicting the world, which is, I guess, something we all have experience with now. This one makes people forget everything, forget their memories, and it seems to come on, and they're looking for a cure, but it's not necessarily there. And in this film, it focuses on a relationship, and it's just it's tough, but so well made and emotional, and so I highly recommend it. Again, if you can make your way through that experience. My second pick, which is almost a complete opposite, is this fun documentary called Banksy Most Wanted. It's about Banksy and his art and an investigation into who he actually is. They pin it down to a few different people, with each person telling you it's absolutely this person. And I couldn't recommend it more highly, because it's a lot of fun, and I think it's very pop culture that people will enjoy. So with that, I want to thank you for coming to our first ever virtual programmers panel, and we look forward to seeing you at the festival, whether in person at the drive-in or through online Q&As and discussions on our digital streaming platform. Thank you.